Good morning, everybody. Brian Neubert here from GoldandBlack.com. Here with day two of your GoldandBlack.com Purdue Basketball Daily, soon to be known as the most half-assed piece of content in the history of GoldandBlack.com. This is a self-improvement exercise for me more than anything because it requires me to shave and clean my desk every now and then. But yesterday we talked about the AP poll and Purdue coming in at number three, and that bumped back the first topic that came to mind to today. That was sort of just a little bit of a breakdown of Purdue's possibilities for its starting five, a topic that I'm quite certain will not have Purdue fans pulling knives on one another after every loss. It is way too early to tell you anything definitive in terms of what starting five Purdue is going to roll with here in a couple of weeks when the first starts flying, so to speak. But for a team that's really well established, from last year to this one, there are more moving parts regarding the starting five than you would probably think. So we'll kind of go through the five positions here. At center, it's an open competition. A lot of different options for Purdue here this year, but I'm going to go ahead and guess they're going to fall back on their comfort zone with starting the National Player of the Year, Zach-Edey. Obviously, he is the centerpiece of this team again after he was the best player in college basketball last season, and basically the most influential player in college basketball. The reason Purdue had the season it had more than anything. Second, point guard, the other guy whose Purdue's success was not possible without last season, Braden Smith. Whether or not Purdue needs to, play him 30 plus minutes every game this season, in big games he will certainly be that guy. But Lance Jones might be in position here to take a little bit of that burden off him, but everyone expects Braden Smith to take a huge jump from one year to the next, and he was really good last season. Purdue expects him to be really good again this season. He will be Purdue's likely second most important player. Purdue's going to ask him to score more. Purdue is just expecting huge things from Braden Smith this year. Fletcher Lawyer at shooting guard, another sophomore who, I think he was Purdue's second leading scorer last year, right? I think Braden Smith probably is Purdue's second leading scorer this year because Purdue's going to ask more from him. But I think Fletcher Lawyer is another guy that is going to take a big jump from one year to the next. A big jump for him would represent just shooting a little bit of a higher percentage from three-point range. High volume guys like him, it's if they're shooting 38%, whatever it might be, that's pretty good. Improving defensively, obviously, is something for him. He's never going to be Ron Artest from a defensive perspective, but, I think there's improvement to be made there. People concerned about his shooting in Europe, I would probably caution against that. I think he had one game where he wasn't great, but I would anticipate him putting a couple percentage points on that three-point percentage from last season, just being a better overall player and being a guy that I would caution against sleeping on here because he's got a chance to be a really, really good player. He was a really good player last year, and I think people are kind of taking that for granted. Now the moving parts. The four is one of those moving parts. Caleb First has a ton of experience. Mason Gillis has more experience than just about anybody in the Big Ten. But Trey Kaufman-Renn has been one of Purdue's best players this summer. And I think that goes a long way. I think there's some proving to be done in terms of whether or not he and Zach-Edey can function together. I've always viewed Mason Gillis as kind of the perfect complement to tether to Zach-Edey. I think his game is ideally complementary to Zach-Edey. Anyone writing off Mason Gillis here is getting way ahead of themselves because he's a proven player. He's a winner. His intangibles are really high. He can stretch the floor. He can make shots. He's a good entry guy. He's just an ideal complement to Zach-Edey. Whether or not Trey Kaufman-Renn can add that complementary value to Zach Edey, that remains to be seen. But I am thinking at this point, and this is my opinion, that this Trey Kaufman-Renn, Zach Edey thing we have made a lot about this offseason might be more of a wrinkle than it is a base lineup. Obviously, a lot remains to be proven here. So really hard for me to make any sort of declarative statements at this point in time. But I think in the context of starting your best five, I think Trey Kaufman-Renn had the sort of summer that would merit him starting. But I think that that there's some dynamics in terms of who plays the best together, what's your most cohesive unit, what's your most logical unit. Kaufman-Renn is going to have to show he can stretch the floor for Edey. They're going to have to show they can figure out the spacing, kind of things like that. The other position, and this is the one where I am just completely on skates in terms of talking about, I have no idea what they're going to do at the third guard / small forward position. No idea as of right now from a starting lineup perspective. I think, what I just talked about with Trey Kaufman-Renn, if you're starting your, presumed best five, I think right now Lance Jones might be that guy. That said, there's some practicalities involved here with you're obviously going to need him to be your first guard off the bench to back up both the 1 and the 2. So whether or not from a rotations perspective you can do that, I don't know. But he is versatile enough to guard a lot of different positions. He's good. He's really good. I think I said this yesterday. I don't know. But I think that the possibility exists that we could be looking back at Lance Jones here in a couple months and recognizing him as that perfect recruit at the perfect time for Purdue, because he speaks to a lot of what Purdue needs to take the jump from great team last season to even greater team this season. But Purdue's got a ton of options here, a ton of options. Ethan Morton, I would not write him off either. He's done some really good things in practice from what I understand here lately now that he's gotten healthy. He's got a ton of experience. He's a capable wing defender, obviously. He's going to want to make shots. He's going to want to, be able to make those open threes that he's going to get. He's had one great shooting season in a complementary role, one not so great shooting season in a complementary role. Maybe this is the season where, somewhere in the middle of the truth lies here, and he kind of bounces back as a shooter. But would not write him off, even though it's my opinion anyway that he probably works his way a little bit more into more of a guard role this year, because Purdue needs depth in the backcourt. Right now, Lance Jones is their third guard. Their fourth guard is, I don't know, maybe Ethan Morton. So I think a lot of these players Purdue's welcoming at this position could free Morton up to be a little bit more of what he was as a sophomore, where he was sort of that guy who, whatever you needed in a given situation, you turned to him off the bench, and he, more often than not, provided it. He was really valuable his sophomore year in that sense, and I think Purdue relied on him maybe a little bit more than was expected last season, because they needed to balance out some defensive shortcomings elsewhere from an experience perspective and ability perspective, whatever it might have been. So I think they rode him a little bit more than maybe he was they were anticipating there. But I would not write him off again this season. I don't know if he's going to be the 25-minute guy he was last season, but I think he'll very much be in that mix to be that number one guy at this position. Camden Heide, obviously, Purdue's got these athletes coming in, and him and Miles Colvin on the wing. He's a big, strong, physically ready, big-time athlete who has all off-season long. My observations, the things I've been told, the things I've seen, has shot it really well, has shot that spot up three really well. Huge part of Purdue's winning formula this season is that this position, making those open threes, because this is the position that is most likely to get those open threes. They're going to help off somebody to sit in Zach Edey's lap, and this is one of the more logical positions for them to do that because there's a lot of unproven guys here. Miles Colvin's a big-time shooter, big-time athlete. There's going to be a huge learning curve here, guys. Don't get ahead of yourselves just because a kid is a big-time talent, which he is. There is going to be a process involved here from a defensive perspective, from an offensive structure perspective, all of that stuff. So if you're expecting Miles Colvin to walk in and be, whoever, you might want to just kind of keep that context in mind. He's going to have a chance to be a great player at Purdue. Whether he can do that or not from day one, there's not a whole lot of precedent for that happening. That said, Purdue's not had a lot of guys with this level of ability before, so always bet on ability, but also understand the context of guys needing to learn and understand what they're doing. And then Brian Waddell. I do not see how Matt Painter doesn't end up playing Brian Waddell because he's such a Matt Painter player. He's such a fundamentally sound, substantive player, and he's been so good all summer. You would walk into practice and you would think this guy's a clear-cut starter, not a guy who was out of the playing rotation for 55 to 60% of the season last year. He was just really, really good. He's athletic. He's long. He's smart. He knows what he's doing from a defensive perspective. From everything I can tell, he's a good passer. He's a capable ball handler. He's made threes. I don't know if he's going to be like a 50% guy, a 45% guy, anything like that. But I think he's a guy who can be credible in that area, along with Heidi and Colvin. They're all very capable of making those shots. But Brian Waddell is just that player Matt Painter has always kind of defaulted to. And if nothing else, he very much puts the, more physically imposing, probably more talented guys ahead of him or around him on notice because he's just rock solid, and I wouldn't bat an eye if he's the guy Purdue winds up going with here. If he doesn't start, it doesn't matter. I still think he's a guy who's more than deserving of a meaningful role in this rotation. You can't play all these guys X number of minutes. You just can't do it. There's no precedent for playing three guys, four guys, five guys, whatever it might be. Not the hamburger place. There's no precedent for being able to get that many minutes for this many guys in the same spot. You have very little flexibility in terms of moving threes to the four because you have too many fours too. If any of these guys can log backup guard minutes, great. But there's just not a lot of minutes to go around. I always go back to whatever year that was when Purdue had Dakota Mathias, Ryan Klein, and Kendall Stevens. And they were playing too many guys at the same position. And Mathias and Klein didn't really take off until Kendall Stevens kind of fell out of the rotation, ultimately left the team. Because I think the limited minutes were holding all three of them back. So sometimes you run the risk of playing too many guys to the detriment of all of them. And I think that's kind of a landmine they're going to have to work around this season. Someone's not going to play as many minutes as they might be capable of or worthy of. And I know that's always a fascinating dynamic for fans. The two questions I get more than any other questions before seasons are, who's going to start, which is the question I've just tried to answer here to the best of my ability, and who's not going to play, which I've always found odd, but I think it's more about fans both celebrating their team's presumed depth but also having their heads on a swivel about who might transfer. I think that's kind of the nature of fandom nowadays, and for good reason, because obviously things are very, very open in that sense nowadays. So that's what I got. I'm giving you a lot of I don't knows there, but I genuinely don't know. After the scrimmage, after I get to see the scrimmage next weekend, maybe I'll have a better idea. But if you ask me right now who they'll start at Arkansas here in a couple weeks, I have no idea. I'll go ahead and bet on Zach-Edey. I'll go ahead and bet on Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer. Outside of that, I think the other two positions are works in progress and wide open. So that's what I got. This has been your GoldandBlack.com Purdue Basketball Daily. I want to encourage you, as always, if you've not already subscribed to us at GoldandBlack.com. I think you can get it for like $1 a month now. I'm not entirely sure, but that sounds about right to me. So if you have been dedicated enough to Purdue basketball fandom that you just sat here with me for 16 minutes, chances are you'd be very interested in our product at GoldandBlack.com. We will have tons of stuff about Purdue basketball here, both this week and through the remainder of the preseason. And then we will obviously cover the hell out of the season when it arrives. So thanks everybody for watching, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow.